Hey, what's up? Hello, and welcome to the Catchin with Carter and Fam podcast show. On this episode, I hunted down somebody important to this world, or at least I think so. I've been lucky enough to get to know Peter Moore, who is a train fan, rail fan, photography guy that really follows the trains and gets some amazing shots. However, I wanted to get somebody that actually works for some rail system. So I posted online on Instagram looking for somebody, and on Facebook looking for somebody to interview, and I got an email back from somebody that used to drive or be a conductor for Norfolk Southern. So of course I'm like, hell yeah, I'm trying to interview this guy because I want to not only learn about what it takes to become a conductor and what the whole process is, joining a railroad system, but also what his feelings are about, the derailment in Ohio and what it's really like to be a conductor and what day-to-day process is, because I've never talked to one before. So I'm really excited to be talking with Chadwick out of a whole nother state that used to be a conductor for Norfolk Southern. So after these two promotions that I always play, we'll be back with Chadwick. They used to be a former conductor for the railroad system, Norfolk Southern. Be right back.
Hey, it's Jackson from Life with Jack. After this video, take a moment to scroll down to my videos, and don't you worry if you like them. More are coming soon. Subscribe, like, and ring the bell of notifications so you don't miss out on another good video.
Hey you, yeah, you over there. Do you have an idea, a podcast idea, something that would go great on this show that somebody should know about, that you or somebody that you know could tell us about? Send us an email at catchinupwithcarter@gmail.com. That's Catchin with no G in the middle. catchinupwithcarter@gmail.com. We want to know your ideas and we want to talk about them. Toodaloo. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're on the Catchin with Carter show. I appreciate you clicking the download on YouTube, and you're going to be hearing us on more platforms coming soon. Now, I have somebody on the phone, very important. I've been looking for somebody that is affiliated with trains. Obviously I know people that take photography of them. We've done a few different podcasts with that. Former conductor for Norfolk Southern. How are you today?
Hey, how you doing, Jeffrey? I'm doing really well, and thankful to be here to just talk about my experience and hopefully give some advice for some other people who want to learn more about it. Yeah. So tell me, what's the process it took for you to get into being a conductor anyway, or working for any train company? How did you get into it? Yeah, great question. So I guess starting back all the way when I was a kid, just always had like a passion for trains, and you don't have to like trains to work for the railroad, or vice versa. You don't have to hate them to work for them either. But it was always just kind of like a passion for me that I had interest in. And then when the opportunity came for it, I applied and just kind of put in my resume, cover letter near the end of 2018. And I heard back a couple days later, and they invited me to a hiring session, which was essentially an in-person interview on like a panel. It was myself and about 30 others. And pretty much, I treated it like a regular professional interview, suit, jacket, tie, pretty much everything, as you would apply for a regular job, even though it was a blue-collar job. Just they asked me a couple questions, and I kind of got some advice from people who currently worked there, not so much like the what to say in the interview, but just like to, what they want to hear and what to elaborate on. So with the really tough on-call schedule, I pretty much just elaborated on, how willing I was to work with that schedule, my willingness to work nights, and, everything that they pretty much, typically do on a daily basis there. And then I think I heard back maybe a week or 10 days after the interview, and they said that I got it.
But what kind of training is it like to be, a conductor? What's the training process like? How long is it from start to finish, would you say?
It honestly kind of depends on the location, and by that I mean the division. So Norfolk Southern had a ton of divisions at the time, and while I was a conductor, they actually condensed them to smaller divisions. So where I was at in the Roanoke division, also known as the Pocahontas division or Pokey division, at the time, they did it right. They did it by the book. So I hired on, and then they gave me like a temporary or conditional hiring, I think is what the term, where I had to pass drug tests. I did a huge background screening. And then that was like once they extended that to me, it was 6 to 8 weeks to get all those tests done. And then they would, invite you over to McDonough, Georgia for their training facility down south, where we were there for 3 weeks. And that was in the classroom training for safety, pretty much everything to learn about the cars, air brakes, brake tests, FRA rules, getting on and off moving, and stationary equipment, which includes cars, engines. They preach safety. That was the biggest thing, and we were on the same understanding. This is huge, heavy, powerful equipment. You do not want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time because you were not paying attention. So that was 3 weeks, and then once you passed the 3 weeks of school there, then you went back to your division, and then you had to complete about 3 months of on-the-ground training, which was just ground essentially. If you hear me say that multiple times here, it just means working literally on the ground, like whether you're in the yard, you hop off a road train, you're on the ground putting cars away, picking up cars. And so did road trains east and west of Roanoke, and then worked the yard jobs and locals there for about 3 months.
Dang, that's cool. Well, but then when you finally got to the conductor part of it, then what was the training like once you were in it? Like how long were you with somebody, or what was it like training with Norfolk Southern?
Yeah, that was the 3 months, hopping on road trains east and west. So essentially they gave me a list of trains that I had to take, just because they're the most frequent ones. So it would be, let's say we would go east all the way to Norfolk. So Roanoke to Norfolk by train is probably, it was a really long trip. Like as soon as you hopped on, the shortest time I ever made it there was about 9 hours. It's a long stretch of just flat area, double main most of the time. You go through Lynchburg, pretty much all the other places just to get to Norfolk. And then you would take the next train, or not the next train, but you'd go to a hotel, sleep for about, you had to get 10 mandatory rest hours. That's federal rules there. And then once the 10 hours was up, there was any time I could get called, take a train back. And that counted like a qualification trip. So I had to get a certain number of those east, a certain number of those west, within like a few weeks time frame. And then I worked some locals for a couple weeks, and then worked a couple yard jobs. Pretty much anything that I could get called for on the extra board is the jobs I got qualified to do. So it would be myself as a CT or conductor trainee with a conductor on board and an engineer, of course. And I'd be on the ground watching them, listening to what they say. Depending on how comfortable they were having me work, they'd say, all right, the CT is going to, tie in the handbrakes just to get me fluent, speaking on the radio and everything.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, so how long, you said about 3 months, and then you were able to lead it by yourself, you're saying, basically, right? Well, how many people were on a train normally, or at least were at the time when you were there? When you would take a load, like how many people were on that train, working wise?
Yeah, is that like when I was a CT trying to qualify, or when I was marked up after that point?
Why don't you say both?
Yeah, most of the time, like I said, it was just engineer, conductor, and then me as the CT. So it's like a normal 2-person crew of engineer, conductor, and then I'm just riding along to learn the territory, learn the signals, where we're going, what our route looks like. And then once I got marked up, that's like the terminology for, being qualified and taken up on a job. Then it was just myself and engineer. And then once I got a little bit more experience and everything, because they had a rule where like you could not have another trainee with you as like a conductor if you had not been out there for about 9 months to a year. So, because like, what's a new person going to learn from someone who's barely been with the company? Just kind of makes sense. So there was a time that, I had been with them, 9 or 10 months, and then I got my first CT, and try to be the best example possible for them, just because, you had great people who set good examples for yourself. So that's kind of person I wanted to be for the next guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, once you get to the 2-person crew, then that's what you're basically saying. Once you got qualified and you got marked up, then that means it's just you and one other person, right?
Yep, just the engineer and myself. And if I'm on the ground, like, uncoupling cars, tying handbrakes, and everything else that you normally see a conductor do, it was just me there by myself, and I was just in communication with the engineer for getting 3-step to go in between cars, dropping 3-step, just communicating, what we're doing essentially for our moves.
But what are you doing then? Like, what do the positions do once the train is moving? Like, what does the engineer do and what does the conductor do? I'm just curious what it's really like. What are some things you're doing on this trip?
Yeah, great question. So I'll pretty much give the details from when we arrive at the yard office to boarding the train and as we're leaving. So I usually, I would get called, and then I had a 2-hour time frame between getting that call to reporting at the yard office, pretty much for our job. So for example, if we were taking a long distance road train, is what we call it on the road, I get to the office, I'd log to the computer, print out my paperwork, which would be like our track bulletins, and we would read through them, find our route, and make sure that there was no maintenance of way, that we had to have some speed restrictions on. If there was like dark territory, which is just like going through an area without any signals, who to contact, when to contact them, and then the paperwork also tells us what kind of power we have, and being someone who is passionate for railroading in general, I personally looked at that just because, like, cool, we got any interviews today? Probably not. Or just get everything to see ahead, do we have any slow orders, which is essentially like, is there any speed restrictions that's caused by maintenance, or do we have to contact a road foreman, or, someone along the way who's going over if there's doing maintenance away, you have to contact them to get cleared through their site. And just, do certain tracks have different speed restrictions or load restrictions, and pretty much look at that. I look through our wheel report, which is like the giant packet holding information on every single car that we're hauling, whether it's empty, loaded, hazardous, all that important information is there. So we read through it to make sure that there's nothing that is incorrect along our route, because if we breeze past that and we miss something, that's on us, and that's our jobs essentially. A really big example of that is the like those auto racks. You familiar with those cars?
Yeah.
So
see quite a bit of them. I live in Rochelle, Illinois, and we get so many trains.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Yeah, so go ahead. Though.
Yeah, so one of the things that we have to be careful on with those is how much like trailing weight you have behind them. So for example, if next time you look at like a freight train that has auto racks on it and it's like empties or loads, and it's like a huge amount of them, it's either going to be one whole unit train of auto racks, or all those auto racks are going to be at the end of the train. Because if you have, I believe it's either 30 or 40, it's been a while, so if it's 30 or 40 of those like long loads, because those cars are about 72 to 86 feet in length, all of those, and if you have excess weight behind them, you will essentially string line going over like a sharp curve. So they want all of those long cars to be at the end of the train, and it's just kind of like physics too. If you're going to pull something light in the front and heavy in the back, it's not going to go very well. They want all your, essentially more of your heavier cars, whether they're loaded or empty, to be near the front, and then the lighter ones at the end, so stuff like that doesn't happen. So that's the kind of stuff that we would kind of read through, and then we essentially get our paperwork, get supplies for the trip essentially, like bottles of water, refill ice for the cooler. Most of all the trains have a cooler inside for, water, for food, if you brought your lunch and stuff like that to eat along the way. And then we would get to the fuel pad, which is just where if they need to refuel engines, they will on the main. And then we'd hop on. The crew would tell us, like, hey, there's an issue with this car. Everything was fine. Have a safe trip. We'd get on. We'd give our bulletin numbers to the dispatcher, who would then approve of us with them or let us know, like, hey, if you guys are clear to go, just hold up that, signal, whatever, before you depart. And let, we got 1 or 2 trains who are going to pass you, and then you can go, pretty much.
So what is the normal shift or distance you go on a trip then? So, what's your work week? What was it like there?
Yeah, it pretty much kind of depends on where you're at. So there's a couple different things you can do. So essentially, if you're on the extra board, you are on call for 6 days straight, and then you're off for 48 hours or 2 days. So let's say your work week was Monday to Saturday, you were off the following Sunday to Monday. The next week you'd be off Monday, Tuesday, just kind of staggered like that. So it definitely kind of, changed things up. So if you kind of do the math, you have 1 full weekend off, like Saturday, Sunday, if that, maybe like a handful of times a year, honestly. So it would be kind of nice to, be done. Like my last trip was on a Friday, and like, wow, I actually had like a full Saturday, Sunday. This is what it feels like to have this again. So that's the one thing. So you could get called and you can work those 6 days, or essentially do 3 round trips, and that'll work. They also have what we're called pool jobs, and that's essentially like a certain territory. So to kind of give like a better description of this, so when I was in Roanoke too, I also got furloughed and I took a transfer to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That's where I stayed for the majority of my time with NS, just because I wanted to still work for them after a bunch of us got furloughed. So I transferred from Roanoke to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and they had a lot of pool jobs there. So to better kind of explain the pool jobs, we went three ways from Harrisburg. It was either to Jersey City, New Jersey, essentially New York City, Morrisville, Pennsylvania, which is like south of Philly, and then Hagerstown, Maryland. And those were the 3 different pools. So you only went to that same destination on a pool job, and it wasn't on call. So you still got called to work, but like your schedule is more predictable because you only took the same trains. It's not like on the extra board where you can get called for a Jersey train, and then the next trip it was to Morrisville and to Hagerstown, or you got called in for the yard job. I preferred the pools because you kind of got more money that way, and they had a schedule because the pool people on that list were called before extra board. So of course extra list is called when no one else is available. So I would take a train to Morrisville and then take a train back. That would count as 2 starts. A round trip counts as 2 starts. And if I made 6 starts without a 24-hour break in between, whether that was at the hotel we stayed at or at home waiting to be called again, then after I did 6 starts, I earned 2 days rest. And that's how that worked. But let's say I worked 1 round trip, we took a train to Jersey, and then I stayed in the hotel more than 24 hours, then it would restart my starts, essentially. So that would essentially have me work 3 jobs and let my 24 hours be in the hotel, not at home. And then I would have to do 6 more starts to get my full 2 days off again, essentially. So I worked a whole lot more on the pool, essentially giving me more money.
I was going to say, I got like a lot of different questions, to be honest, but what was the average amount of cars you would carry on a load, I guess? Yeah, there you go.
So I guess I'll break it down by like the type of trains I took. So most intermodal trains would be essentially like 25 to 30 cars, but as you know, some like those well cars are either like sets of 3, sets of 5. So even though it's sets of 3 cars in one like intermodal clump articulated, that still counts as 1 car. So you've got 25 cars, but your singular individual well cars could be like 70 or something like that. So there's a little method to kind of break that down on your paperwork and everything. But those ones, they average to be like maybe a mile and a half. Freight trains was usually a mile and a half to 2 miles. It was honestly kind of like a treat, honestly, if you got a freight train that was less than 50 cars, just because light load, fairly easy, not a whole lot of work. The longest train I ever had was a freight train, 298 cars. We had 2 set, like a pair of distributed power in the middle of the train, and we were 18,000 feet long, and we were 21,000 tons.
Wow. That's crazy. What were some things, I guess, if you can talk about it, what were some things that you would carry that when you first, became a position, you're like, okay, I didn't know what was in one of the, you know what I mean? Like, what were some of the things you carried that maybe some people don't know? Because I don't know everything that goes by. I just see cars that are graffitiized, that look, some of them look really cool. Yeah. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. But like, I don't know anything about what's inside them. Yes, some cars, yes, some liquids, but what kinds and what else?
Well, a lot of the tank cars, if it wasn't like oil or ethanol that were in like unit trains, and unit train is like, those long tank trains that snake around, as they go. But most of the tankers that I took going to Morrisville, I don't even know what the industry is there, but we took a lot of like corn syrup, honestly. They were like the little short, stumpy tank cars and just filled with corn syrup, honestly. We also had essentially, like, one of the trains we took was called a 38G, and the back half of that train was loads of like sheet metal, just 70 black and white Norfolk Southern gondolas, just straight sheet metal. But most of the time, it wasn't really anything crazy. Most of the intermodal trains were, mail, like FedEx, USPS, UPS, and trailers and everything like that. So that was essentially it. Nothing too crazy. I think we had one occasional high and wide load, which again just goes over my head because it's just probably some giant machinery part or like a generator kind of deal. But that was pretty much what we usually hauled. Never had something unusual before.
I was just wondering because I see a lot of different types of chemical things go by and whatever, and I wonder, what if each conductor has to learn about each MSDS, you know what I'm saying, like the safety conditions and like what it was like to learn all the things that you would carry, because I know there's a wide range of things that trains carry. I know there's I mean you could talk about things for days, I think, but what was it like in the car or in the train itself, like when you're going, like what all is in there and what are you doing during your shift? I mean, is it kind of chill? Or are you like coasting along? You're just kind of looking along what's going on, or what are some things you do inside the train while you're going?
Yeah. I think you asked it earlier, and I totally apologize if I forgot to answer that initially. Okay. But we'd hop on, and once we got going, so the engineer, essentially his position is straightforward. He's the one who operates the train. He also communicates with dispatch if need be, like if there's something wrong, because he's going to inspect all the engines in our head-end power before we depart to make sure everything's good to go, turned on, functioning properly. I think it's like an FRA rule that they inspect it too. And then once he says we're good to go, that's when I contact the dispatch, and I have a radio. It essentially looks like a what's the word? Like one of those public telephones that you see out in like New York City or something.
Yeah, okay.
It's like that phone, but it has like a single button on it. When you press the button, that's you opening up like your end of the radio from the train into like the channel for the dispatch. And they have certain dial-up buttons to contact them, just to, make sure they get notified. Essentially you calling them. So you press a couple buttons, they would get dinged saying that, there's a crew contacting them, and then they would, respond. But yeah, once we got going, my job was just to keep in charge of paperwork, make sure everything looked good. Like I said, if there was maintenance of way, I was the one contacting the maintenance foreman. So if we leave Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, let's say in Hershey, they're doing track maintenance on Main 2 or on Main 1. So I had a rule personally that most crews contact like a mile out. I contact a mile and a half to 2 miles out just in case, safety kind of deal. And so I would just say like, hey, this is NS 20K contacting road, site foreman Smith, over. And they would respond back and it's like, site foreman Smith answering NS 20K. And then I would say, hey, this is the 20K. We're coming by on track 1. This is our lead engine. We'll be coming by in about a mile and a half or so. It was like, all right, NS 20K, here's your cab number. They would just pretty much repeat what I say. And he said, thanks for letting me know. Ring the bell, blow the horn for the maintenance people on, this track. And so we would do that, blow the horn, ring the bell, just so that they're notified that we're coming by and they can get all their crew members out of the way.
Okay. I was just wondering, what's going on inside there and what all goes in there. I'm guessing there's a restroom, right, that you can go to the bathroom in then? And
yeah, and I hope you never have to see it. It's terrible.
Really?
It is, yeah. It's essentially, picture a regular Johnny Blue that is, about shoulder wide for you or anybody, essentially. And it's disgusting. It smells terrible. I mean, unless you need a bright, shiny new engine like those, I think they're AC 4400s or something right now. Those ones, they're okay. But they're pretty filthy, smell terrible, like a Dash 9. Disgusting.
Oh, no.
But they're just really small. If I was going, I would just, be like, hey, I need the restroom real quick. We're going to have to say because we're grown adults. But if the engineer had to go, they would just say, hey, just hit the alerter for me. I'll be back in a minute. And I was like, okay. So most of the time, they chose areas that were not going to be near crossings because then if something happens, I'm responsible because I'm at the throttle essentially. But yeah. I would never drive it for them in that situation. But yeah, pretty much along the road, I'd be calling signals so people can hear it. And engineer just they just drive it, blow the horn at the crossing, and we're two sets of eyes. If there's something they don't see that I see, I communicate that and vice versa.
What's it like being in the front like that and going? What are some things that you really like to see and saw along those few years that you were along with Norfolk Southern? What are some things you saw that you were like, man, that was a really cool part of my job?
Yeah, great question. I think I would probably describe this as the beauty in disguise. So you would get called super early for a train, but then since we traveled east a lot, you would see the sunrise from the cab of a train. You're lifted up high. There's essentially darkness behind you, darkness around you, and then you see first light of the day. And I just found that to be very calming, very beautiful. And even if I was working on the ground and the sun came up, you could get that first cool rush of the last bit of nighttime kind of blowing away in the breeze, and then the sun comes up, you feel the solar heat. So it was just really cool to kind of see it from that perspective, watch the world go by from the front of the cab. And for me personally, since this was a childhood dream of mine, it was you made it. This is what you've always wanted to do. My first time getting on a train was as a trainee, of course, and it was early morning coal train from Roanoke when I were initially hired out of, and everyone else got on board, and I just waited 10 seconds till they were up on the steps to climb up, and I just took a deep breath, and I was like, you did it. You are here. You've achieved this, and just soaked it all in. And for all that, a personal moment that was really fun. We were on a really crappy Dash 9, so it didn't really matter what engine I could have gone on. It still would have been a really good moment. But I think my favorite train to take of all time was probably the early morning mail train coming home from Morrisville. we'd get up at like 4:30 and we would depart at 6:30 or sooner because we were important mail priority. And they would pretty much light us up the whole way so we could leave Morrisville and get back to Harrisburg in about 3.5 to 4 hours. And I was done. And I knew I was pretty much going to either get called in the middle of the night or early morning next day. So I at least had 12, 24 hours to just relax, rest, and be home with my wife. It was just really good mornings, just to, going on a section, just straight track, no crossings for a while. So I just open the window, stick my arm out, and just kind of take in the day, because it can be really stressful and definitely draining. And I absolutely felt that. But, those are some of the moments where, you get your serotonin released because, your mind was being relaxed at that moment.
Knowing, you're going to be home soon. What was it like, since I have a family of 4, what was it like with you and your wife then? Because you have a baby now, so I'm guessing you didn't have a baby when you were still in the train business then?
Yeah, so our daughter was born in November of 2021, and that I was done with them by the end of July, going into August of that year. And it was a very bittersweet decision, because I knew that I was letting go of the dream that I really wanted to do. But at the same time, I was straight up miserable. We had 60 guys quit from January to May of 2021. So all of that excess work was left for the less employees who were still with the company. And as those pool jobs I mentioned that had those starts, there was a time where I did 10 jobs in 8 days because my starts were broken when I was in a hotel. So the rule of thumb is, if you get 6 starts, of course, you get 24 hours off. But if you are kind of in an oddity of that, so my first start was a trip back home, and I still had 6 more jobs to do. So I had 7 jobs, which gave me 7 starts. And so the rule for the FRA is, if you get 7 starts, you have 3 days off. So it was nice to earn that, but still 10 jobs in 8 days. And that was kind of the decision point for me to kind of realize I can't put my body through this all the time. Because there were guys I work with who was they're really great people, but I did not want to have a physical limitation as far as my health, my mental health, emotional health too. And, being present. They would say there's a lot of things that they missed out on their kids. And I'm absolutely, all about taking care of the family, but I'm also about being present with the family. Mm-hmm. And I think I had a little, I guess, I don't even call it epiphany, but just kind of a little reflection on, what is living your dream worth in the long run? If I left, which, as we know, I did, but if I had stayed, would it have been worth, what my whole health would have been through? Would I be as close with my children as I am now? Will that continue to play out, or will I just be ships passing in the night, where I'm going to work as they're going to bed, I'm sleeping as they're awake, or trying to be present at their, games, recitals, events, essentially, and then being dragged away by my work. It was, tough to say goodbye. I was tearful on my last trip, just because I was letting go of that. But one of my good friends, who is an engineer, he loves trains too, just like me. He's a great father, husband, and a great friend to me. And we had some of the best trips when we worked together. He was just you do not need to feel bad about this decision. He said, you're doing what a lot of people could have done and feel like they should have done years ago, but they're trapped by the railroad now. So it definitely had, I guess, a physical toll on my health for that. But, my wife, who's my best friend, my partner and everything, when I would get the call, of course it would wake her up too and everything. So I'd be packing my stuff, getting in the shower before the trip, and then, she would help. She'd pack my lunch. She'd be a note for me and every single thing. And, she was really encouraging and supportive, saying, I get it's 3 a.m. but you're a great conductor. You're going to have a great trip, pretty much, like giving me, positive encouragement, even though it's like a rough day, essentially. But, that's the kind of marriage that we have, that we still continue to have and everything. So, I was not alone in that, and she definitely helped carry some of the weight and stress that I, dealt with at work.
That's an awesome thing, because I love my family too. And right now, one of the jobs I'm work to make income is I work at a truck stop, and I talk to truckers all the time. And it seems similar in a way, how much they have to drive, and they make great money. And, I'm like, well, how about your kid's life? They're like, well, there isn't much of that, and they miss so many things, and they love their job. And so I can understand that completely, because I love my family, and I understand that your love for trains as well, and to get to that point. But at least you got a chance to do that for a little while, I guess. And, you never know what the world might lead you to later on. I don't know what it would be involved in the train business, but I'm sure there could be something. And that's really awesome to hear about a marriage like that still, that is that strong. And what a great woman to stand behind you and do what she did, which takes a lot on her too, to be that person to be home and not know about safety. And I want to get to that in a second. What was it like? What was like the worst conditions that you had seen, like weather-wise? Like, what was it like, rain or snow? Was there some times where you were just like, oh God, am I going to make it home or no?
The weather never really presented itself as like, we're like, it's putting the train in danger. The only time it really can is after like severe flash flooding, because of course that will affect the ballast and the rails if something goes on it. So we never had something like that. We did have like flash flood warnings. So if there was a very flat patch of elevation, we had to go very slow over it in case of like washouts and stuff. But Mother Nature did not really affect us. They definitely had pouring down rain days, snowy days, and those are kind of the days where you hop off the train no matter what time it is, because like it'd be 3 a.m. pouring rain, and here I am like waiting outside to like get our train coupled up. So I'm freezing cold. I'm just like, yep, we're soaking wet. We can't really change anything about it, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. And same thing for the snow. Like Pennsylvania got a ton of snow, so I'd be walking our half-mile train in 1.5 feet of snow, and like pretty much high stepping it the entire way, in heavy boots and heavy winter gear, a brake stick, radio, everything pretty much. As far as what was required of our gear, just to go like 40 cars into our train to make uncouple it, tie them down, essentially. But yeah, never had any, issues. We never really hit anything on the train. Thankfully, never hit a person, never hit a car. Good. I think the only thing I've ever hit was like a deer or two and like a fallen tree. And thankfully the tree that we hit was like decomposing halfway, so like it literally turned into mulch when we hit it.
Thank God. Probably kind of cool to see, actually. Wish you had it on camera. Or is there a camera up front too then, or?
Yeah, there is a camera at like the front window. It may be a little bit hard to see, I guess, from like track side if y'all are watching trains go by, but it looks out to see what we see. And then there's a camera in the back of every single engine to pretty much look at the crew to see what we're seeing, to see if if there is an accident. They're like, what did the crew do leading up to this accident? What safety precautions did they take, or what was their vision, essentially? So that's why those cameras are there. So yeah.
What about hobos? You ever deal with a hobo?
I had one when I was in Reading, which is a very dangerous place to be, especially at night. I guess I'm trying to find the most respectful terminology here for it, but yeah, just really ghetto location, not very safe at all. And I always work there at night, so we were shoving back a train and then cutting loose from it to pick up more cars. And when I was in the yard in Reading, I was walking back to make sure all the handbrakes were off, and there was a boxcar next to me, not in our train, but just in the yard. Door was open. Trying my lighters to make sure nothing's going crazy, and there's a guy just chilling in the corner. And he was just like, "You're not going to report me, are you?" And I said, "What are you trying to do?" And he was just like, "Just hitching a ride, man. I don't know where this train's going." I said, "Well, you're not coupled up to anything, so you're not going anywhere." And he's like, "That's fine." He said, "It keeps me dry." So I just said, "Do not touch anything, do not mess anything," and I had no reason to report you. So I just kept walking. Normally, it's kind of like a hornet's nest. You don't bother them, they don't bother you, unless they're like psycho. But this guy was just chill, just trying to stay dry.
I was always wondering about that, because I know we have quite a few that I heard about them. I want to meet one and interview them, but I haven't met one yet. Well, actually, I have met one, but I never got a chance to get his number because he didn't have a phone. But that's a whole nother story. So the big question, of course, that is going on is what was training like as a conductor? What did you have to go through dealing with derailments?
So pretty much if something happened, whether it was my fault, engineer's fault, another crew's fault, you always got to report it. The radios are constantly being recorded 24/7, so even if you accidentally say something on the radio, someone's going to hear it. But I never had that happen. I never had a derail, never had an accident, never had like an issue. But from times that I did hear something happen, it was like either a bad car where an axle fell in the yard and it derailed, or someone did not tie enough handbrakes on, so cars were sliding through the yard, hit another train or hit some other cars, then those derailed. But no matter what, you stop movement, you contact somebody, and you make sure that everything is currently safe for you at the time and for others, because you may derail, but you don't know what's coming next to you. So you always report it, so that everyone hears it on the radio. If your train goes into emergency, so that did happen a couple times. You go over a detector, it's like emergency, alarm, or our brake goes on. We were told to put on the radio and just say, NS, let's say for example 20K again. So NS 20K. Emergency, main one, we're in emergency right now. Something wrong with the air hose, or, defect detector said there's a hot brake or hot wheel, pretty much. And we let other people know about that, because if there's an oncoming train on the opposite track and something's derailed, they may not know about it. So they're listening to being caution as well.
That's got to be scary, right? So you stop the train, and then what? You're just sitting there waiting for somebody to come help you then?
We stop the train, we report it. I'm the one who goes on the ground to take a look at it. So, for example, we took an empty trash train from Harrisburg to New Jersey, and we go up this big mountain right at the Pennsylvania-New Jersey state line, and we were going down the hill, actually, and our train went into emergency. The red light, when that happens, the red light in the cab just turns bright red, it flashes on. We come to a stop, and so I just said, NS, 62V, main one, going east, in emergency. Conductor's getting out to walk the train. So I pretty much walked 90% of this train and found that the coupling had come undone, and that essentially pulled apart the air brakes. So whenever the air brakes come apart, whether the train's moving or not moving, and there's air flowing, the train goes into emergency, just putting on emergency brakes so nothing moves away. So I walked back there because I really thought it was a broken knuckle or something like that. So thankfully the knuckle wasn't broken, which saved me a bunch of extra time. This was also in the snow, by the way. And so I walked in the snow early morning and just found that the couple came undone. So I lined up the couplers, opened them up, walked the train back, and then we recharged up our air, made sure everything was good on our end of train device, and then I walked all the way back to the front. And then we made it back to Jersey. So definitely put about a 2-hour delay on our trip.
So my question of the hour then, or the year, is what were your thoughts on what happened over in East Palestine, Ohio with Norfolk Southern with that train derailment? What do you think was going through that guy's mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. Like, I hate, hearing about it, and I'm, even though I'm out of the railroad, like, I still, speak to some of the guys there, but from word of mouth of what I've, communicated with them, I know because of this, especially like the rail fan community is like, doing all their research for people who also don't know anything about trains. But it sounds like the train, when it picked up cars out of Pittsburgh, they changed symbols for all the trains after I had left, so I don't know what train symbol this was, but it sounds like if it happened at like the middle of the train, essentially, they picked up cars, and either there was a handbrake that someone was unaware of that was still tied on, or the conductor just did not undo all the handbrakes, or if they picked up like a length of 10 cars, maybe that 10th car had a handbrake on that he was unaware of, because sometimes they're usually on one end or the other. And I think that they just coupled it up, didn't hear an issue, and kept going. And then like that excess heat, because it's just literally like metal on metal friction, which heats up a lot. And then as far as what I know, like they went over a switch with that really hot axle, and they had gotten caught by the defect detector 20 miles after they departed, and they went over a switch, and that's when the accident happened. The biggest thing that really like surprises me for this is like defect detectors are placed on the main line every 1.5 to 2 miles, maybe 2.5 to 3. But if that train departed 20 miles and didn't get caught by at least like, you think 5 to 6 defect detectors before this accident happened? Because I've had a Hot Wheel myself. I've left a yard where I cut off all the handbrakes that we picked up, and then the handbrake that was hot on this train, or the axle that was hot, was like near the end of our train, which means someone in the yard building our train did not take off one of the handbrakes, and that's how stuff like this happens. But like, it caught it by our second defect detector, and we were notified. I walked the train. I checked it to make sure it passed like a heat test, and when it passed, we just undid the brake and we carried on away. No issues. But that's just like been the biggest question for me. Like, if you went 20 miles, how are there not 5 or 6 defect detectors that could have caught this earlier?
Yeah, I've been doing quite a bit of research on it, and to be honest, I am going to do another podcast with somebody about that itself, and I don't want to go that complete angle with you on this one, but what I thought was really trippy that I learned about the other day is that on Netflix, that movie White Noise, I don't know if you heard about that. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
It's really trippy.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, well, what's really trippy about it is that it was filmed in, I think, 2021, right? And it's filmed about that exact same town. And basically the same exact thing has happened, but I haven't seen the whole one thing through so far. I only seen like 20 minutes of it so far. I'm right at when the derailment happens. But it's in the same town. Matter of fact, some of the people that were affected were extras in this movie. So it's really trippy that it happened there, yeah. And I was just wondering, like, what it's like when something like that happens, or what training is like, because we also were looking on a blog online one time, my fiance and I, and it said a lot of train conductors end up in their career hitting at least one person, and I'm just like, what do they do for you for that? I mean, do they, like this train derailment guy, the people that were involved in that, what do you think the protocol is for them? Do you think they'll give them some time off? Because that's tragic right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess they really have to do their research, because like airplanes having like the black box if there's an accident, trains have that as well in like the front of the cab. So if there's like an accident, that's one of the things that survives. But I think it kind of depends on like the severity of the accident and like what's involved with it. Like, of course, any accident at the crossing, you have to stop, you have to report it. Like we are not required to get off the train and make sure that whatever person or vehicle we hit, like the person inside is okay. That's more of like you pick your poison on that. There's been engineers that I work with, because of course you're a conductor, you work way up to engineer. the people when they're conductors and they make the decision to go see and make sure they're okay. Sometimes it's scarring for life. Sometimes like they're actually able to help somebody because they're still, conscious and, they're not completely essentially destroyed because you just got hit by a train. But that choice is up to them of what they want to do. But if it's this chemical disaster, like what's going on in East Palestine, or Palestine, but I would assume that the crew pretty much ran to get safety because they're hauling huge chemicals, and stuff like that. So they want to tell people about it. I'm not sure if you've seen this before on YouTube. Are you familiar with the Graniteville chemical disaster?
No, but I'm going to look it up right after I get off the phone.
Yeah,
Graniteville, no.
3 to 4 minute video. So the worst chemical disaster in American history was from Norfolk Southern in 2005, 2006, where a late night local was traveling down the main, and the previous day shift local did not return the switchback like main to main. And that local, which was carrying, random supplies and everything, it also had several tankers of loaded chlorine gas. It went into the siding, hit the park train, derailed, and tons and thousands of tons of chlorine gas covered the city. 9 people passed away within the town. It broke the backbone of their local industries, and they pretty much measured it as the worst chemical disaster in American history. But with what's going on in Ohio right now, this could very well surpass it. It's just strange that it's happened with NS twice within 20 years.
Well, yeah, and you know what? There was one in Ohio with NS a week later too. There's been a lot of derailments, and the reason why I'm looking up more about it too is because where I live in Rochelle, Illinois, is a hub, so we get 80 to 140 a day, and so we're a block away. And my fiance and I are like, did we make a mistake buying a house here? For something like that would happen with the shrapnel or with the chemical that goes more than a mile, we would be more than affected. We'd be one of the first ones to be affected. And we have animals, we have dogs, and kids. So to think that's got to be really scary. And, it's kind of hard not to watch some of these conspiracy theorists and stuff like that, because there's a lot of them out there that are just pointing out a lot of weird things about this accident and how they're treating people there. And I'm following some of them also on Facebook on their actual pages, and what the people are saying and what they're reporting is, there's a lot of weird stuff going on. And it's got to be really scary for the guys that were involved in the accident. You know what I mean? The conductor and the engineer are just oh, now we're on a spotlight. Yuck. You feel for the people. Yeah, you definitely feel for them. I of course absolutely feel for that crew and everything. You don't know what they're thinking or how they're feeling, of course, because I guess they're still trying to figure out was this human error, or was this maybe this car just really had a bad axle that no one checked, because sometimes there can be hairline, some microscopic fractures in axles, and then it just takes one little bump and break to cause a huge accident. So I think there's a huge difference depending on what the accident is, whether it's a huge disaster like this, or if you hit something at a crossing, because that's definitely more of a something you take for life, I believe. There's some people, I know people who work for NS who have hit pedestrians or cars at a crossing multiple times, 3 to 4. Oh my gosh. I couldn't go on, I don't think.
To hit someone. Yeah, and that's the thing too, how did they keep going? I'm 99% sure that NS gives them grievance time, essentially, to grieve and kind of do some mental health check and everything.
I sure hope so. Yeah. Yeah, I hope so, man. That's oh God, that just gave me the heebie-jeebies. We lost a couple people not far from our house, and we're damn, we wish we left some flowers right by there, man. Once we figured out, we saw the police cars there, and then later on we found out somebody had left the bar and upset and took his life, and it's damn. I feel for the cop, and I feel for the guy, the train conductor, of course.
Yeah, there's so much that you don't know, that goes on outside of that, like I said, I never hit somebody or like a vehicle or anything, just like deer or trees, but like I did have like a very close call when we were going to Jersey very late at night, and there was like a trespasser literally standing in the gauge of our track, and like my engineer was blowing the horn. I look at him, I'm just like, why are you blowing the horn? Like, we know there's not a crossing here. He's just like, look. And there's some hooligan who, and it's pouring rain outside too. Like, this guy is wearing like a white beater shirt and gym shorts, no shoes whatsoever. And he's literally like standing in the middle of the tracks, like, you know, pretty much like waving his arms around, doing some kind of like rain dance or whatever. He's probably high as a kite. I could smell him when we passed him. But like, he jumped out at like the very last second, and like going into the, like, you know, what was about to happen, I was just like, all right, today's the day, because it's not like a, you know, if you're going to hit someone, it's a when you're going to hit them, because it happens all the time. Not like on a daily basis as far as like what I experienced, but like, you know, they say if you're with the railroad long enough, like, it's going to happen. So yeah, like, he jumped out the last second. I looked past the window to make sure like we didn't hit him. That's where I like could smell the weed off of him, but I was just like, I was so angry because like I was just angry the rest of the night. We never hit him, but like I was angry because of how stupid that he was for that.
Yeah, you know, you watch people that mess up all the time. I was watching one YouTube video the kids had on, and it was like epic fails of people doing epic, like they'll do like a trick and then they'll slip and they'll fall down tons of feet from a building or something crazy. Like, damn, yeah. No way I am good on that. Same thing with the train. Like, nope, I'm good. Man, I really appreciate this time, man, and we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 where I have a lot more questions. We're already getting close to an hour, and I have more questions about trains, but it's getting late, and I got to go after the kids, and you probably got things to do too. I appreciate your time so much, and I hope you take care, and hope everything's good with the family.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey. You too, sir. Thanks for you know posting this. I'm happy to give some information. You know, just sharing about my experience. I will always encourage someone to go work for the railroad if that's what their dream is. You know, even though I'm left, you know, I model O-Gauge, so I have my own YouTube channel. I run trains, and you know, the passion still hasn't died even though I left the railroad, so it still goes on. But yeah, thanks for, you know, starting this and hosting this. If you have any other questions, you know, just hit me up for a part 2. Be more than happy to help with that.
Thank you for spending an hour of your time with us. Now will you do yourself a favor? Check us out on Catching Up with Carter and Fam Show. Do yourself another favor and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Insta. Our dog's also up there, so you'll be doing yourself a third favor. And we'll see you next week. Toodles.